The United States has had 47 vice presidents, from John Adams to Joe Biden. The word vice comes from Latin, meaning in place of. Sometimes the vice president is called the VP or Veep. Whatever you call it, everyone knows that the vice president takes over for the president in case the president dies, resigns, becomes impaired, or is removed from office. Being vice president sounds like a big deal, but what other duties does the VP have? Well, not many. The Constitution says that the VP serves as the President of the Senate, where he only votes in the case of a tie. He also presides over the counting of electoral college votes. The President may ask the VP to advise him or her or undertake a specific task. The Constitution doesn't give the Vice President much to do. Perhaps that's why Hillary Clinton was not interested in being President Obama's VP. As Secretary of State, she has many more duties. You know the U.S. has 3 branches of government: executive, legislative, and judicial. The Constitution keeps these 3 branches separate. However, it's interesting that the Vice President can be considered a member of 2 branches, the legislative and the executive. As President of the Senate and tiebreaker, it would seem that the Vice President is part of the legislative branch. As advisor and potential successor to the President, it would seem that the VP is part of the executive branch. Former VP Dick Cheney had an office near the Congress and an office in the West Wing of the White House. Most commonly, though, the VP is considered part of the President's administration and part of the executive branch. If you want to become VP, you have to be at least 35 years old, born in the U.S., and have resided in the USA for at least 14 years. You'll need to be picked as the running mate by a candidate for president. On Election Day, states vote for electors that will cast their own votes for president and vice president. You must receive at least 270 of the 538 electoral votes. It is possible to become president without being elected president or vice president. In 1973, VP Spiro Agnew resigned. President Nixon followed the process outlined in the 25th Amendment and nominated Gerald Ford as the new VP. Ford was confirmed by Congress. In 1974, President Nixon resigned, and Ford became president, having never been elected. As president, he did pardon Nixon for the crimes that led him to resign. 8 VPs have taken over the presidency because of the death of a president. Add Ford's succession to the president, and that means 9 out of 47 VPs have taken over as president. A whopping 11 of the 47 vice presidents have been from New York, and many were from large states as well. Being from a large state may help candidates win elections, but it probably does not make them any better at the job. Dan Quayle was from Indiana and was not considered to be a particularly good vice president because of his many misstatements and silly sayings. He once said, "I love California. I practically grew up in Phoenix." He also said, "If we don't succeed, we run the risk of failure." His goofs were embarrassing, and I wonder how much the public would trust him to be president if he had to take over for President George H.W. Bush. So what makes a good vice president? Since the VP's role is to take over for president, I think the same qualities that make a good president also make a good vice president. While Dan Quayle wasn't the best public speaker because of his multiple goofs, I think a good VP should be a good communicator. This way, they can offer good advice to the president. Above all, I think a good VP needs to know the U.S. Constitution so that they understand their role and others' roles in government. Most vice presidents have had a law degree, and many have spent years of their lives studying the Constitution. After all, presidents must take an oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution, and that might just be an oath a VP takes if he or she becomes president.